Your seedlings are alive. They sprouted. And right now, in this exact window, the next 72 hours, you have the single greatest opportunity you'll get all season to determine how much food those plants actually produce. Not when you transplant, not when you fertilize. Right now, most gardeners don't know that. And the ones who do, their harvests show it. You've been here before. You do everything right to get germination, the right soil mix, the right warmth, the careful watering. And then the seeds sprout, and you breathe this huge sigh of relief. And then you just watch them. You water when the soil gets dry. You move them toward the light. And somewhere between that tray of tiny seedlings and harvest time, something goes wrong. The plants look fine, but they never quite deliver what you expected. The stems aren't as strong as you'd hoped. The roots struggle when you transplant. The yield is okay, but okay isn't why you started a garden. You've followed all the standard advice, and you still can't figure out why your plants just don't perform the way you know they should. That feeling? It's not your fault. The advice you've been given skips the most important stage entirely. I've been growing food in tropical and subtropical conditions for over 20 years. I've tested more than 40 varieties, made every mistake worth making, and spent years going back to horticultural science to figure out why certain plants thrived and certain ones quietly underperformed. What I'm sharing today isn't opinion. It's what the research actually says, translated into what you can actually do in your garden, starting today. Here's the belief that most gardening content reinforces. Once your seeds sprout, your job is to keep them alive until transplant time. Water them, give them light. Don't disturb them. Let them grow. I used to believe that too. And here's what I actually found after years of testing and digging into plant science. That passive approach is the single biggest reason home gardeners cap their own yields before the season even begins. The sprouting stage is not a rest period. It is the most biologically active, environmentally responsive window in your plant's entire life. Every signal your seedling receives right now, from touch, temperature, water, light spectrum, and root space, is being translated into permanent structural decisions the plant will carry all the way to harvest. The standard advice isn't wrong exactly. It's just catastrophically incomplete. And that gap is costing you yield every single season. We're going to go through 9 of these techniques today. And I want you to stay with me through all of them because Secret 5 is the one that genuinely makes most gardeners uncomfortable the first time they hear it. It looks like you're doing something wrong. The science says it's one of the smartest things you can do. I'll explain exactly why when we get there. Secret 1. Touch your seedlings every day. This sounds almost too simple, and I completely understand if your first reaction is skepticism. Mine was too. But this is backed by decades of plant biomechanics research, and it has a name. Thigmomorphogenesis. Say it slowly. Thigmomorphogenesis. It's a long word for a simple truth. In nature, seedlings are never left alone. Wind moves them, rain hits them, insects brush past. Every one of those small physical contacts triggers a hormonal response inside the plant that redirects energy away from height growth and toward stem thickening and root expansion. The plant interprets physical contact as an environmental signal that it's in an open, active environment where structural strength matters. What you do once or twice a day, run your clean hand or a soft piece of cardboard gently across the tops of your seedlings. A slow, light sweep. About 5 seconds. That's it. Do it consistently for the first 2 weeks after sprouting, and the difference in stem diameter compared to untouched seedlings is visible to the naked eye. Thicker stems mean better vascular flow, better transport of water and nutrients from roots to leaves, even dramatically better survival rates through transplant shock. The objection I always hear is, won't touching them spread disease? Use a clean hand or a clean card. The risk is negligible. The benefit is structural and measurable. Secret 2. Drop your nighttime temperature. Most home gardeners keep their seedlings at a consistent room temperature, day and night. Commercial propagators do the exact opposite. The technique is called thermoperiodism, and it involves intentionally dropping nighttime temperature by 8 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit below your daytime growing temperature. If your seedlings sit at 80 degrees during the day, you want them experiencing 68 to 72 degrees at night. Here's why it works. Warmer temperatures accelerate cell elongation. That's what causes seedlings to get tall and spindly. It is what growers call etiolation. Cooler nights slow that elongation significantly. Instead of pushing upward, the plant consolidates. Cell walls thicken. Sugar accumulates in the stem tissue. Internode spacing and the gap between leaf sets gets shorter. And shorter internodes are one of the clearest indicators of a structurally productive plant. In a tropical climate, this can be trickier. The nights are warm. But even moving seedlings to your coolest indoor space overnight, or running a fan to create convective cooling, will make a measurable difference. You don't need a climate-controlled greenhouse. You need a temperature differential consistently applied. Secret 3. Switch to fabric pots at the first true leaf. When you grow seedlings in smooth-walled plastic cells or trays, here's what happens to the roots. They grow outward until they hit the container wall. Then they follow the wall. They circle. And circling roots don't straighten out at transplant. They stay distorted, and that distortion limits the root architecture the plant can ever build. A plant with a compromised root system is limited at harvest, regardless of what you do above the soil. Air pruning solves this. When root tips reach the edge of a fabric pot or a perforated container, they meet air instead of a wall. The tip desiccates, it stops growing cleanly, and the plant responds by generating multiple lateral branches from behind that point. Instead of one circling root, you get 3 or 4 healthy lateral roots reaching outward. The root system that develops is denser, more fibrous, and more efficient at pulling water and nutrients from a larger volume of soil. You don't need to repot into large fabric pots. At the first true leaf stage, move your seedlings from smooth plastic cells into small fabric pots. Even 2-inch or 3-inch fabric pots will do it. The root architecture that develops in the next 2 weeks before transplant will be measurably better than anything you get from a standard tray. Now, before we get to Secret 4, I want to ask you something directly. Drop it in the comments. When your seeds sprout, what's the first thing you actually do? Do you move them to more light? Do you start fertilizing? Do you just leave them alone and hope? I read every comment on this channel, and I want to know where you're starting from because it shapes what I cover next. And if you're finding this useful, if even one of these secrets is something you've never heard before, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. There's a lot more where this comes from, and I don't want you to miss the transplanting video that follows this one up. Secret 4. Feed silica at the cotyledon stage. Silicon is the fourth most abundant element in the Earth's crust. It is almost completely absent from home gardening content. That gap is a real problem. Research in plant physiology has documented clearly that silicon uptake during early vegetative growth strengthens cell walls at the structural level. Stems become more rigid, leaves develop greater resistance to fungal pressure. Root cells become more resilient to osmotic stress, meaning they handle drought and overwatering fluctuations better. See, these are not minor improvements. They are foundational structural advantages that compound throughout the plant's entire life. The product form you're looking for is potassium silicate in the liquid form or a silica supplement designed for early plant development. A highly diluted solution. Check your product label for seedling rates as you want to start at around 1/4 of the standard dose. Applied from the cotyledon stage onward costs almost nothing. You are not fertilizing in the traditional sense. Silica doesn't appear on an NPK label. You are building the physical skeleton the plant grows into. One note for my tropical and subtropical growers, specifically, in humid climates where fungal pressure on seedlings is a real risk, early silica application gives you a structural advantage against powdery mildew and damping off that no fungicide addresses at the root cause. This is not folk wisdom, it's peer-reviewed plant physiology. Secret 5. The controlled wilt all right. This is the one I told you to wait for, and I want you to hear me out completely before you decide it's wrong. Allowing your seedlings to experience a brief, controlled, mild wilt, not collapse, not crisis, just the very early visible signs of water stress before you water them triggers a root response that permanently changes the plant's architecture. When a plant detects the early onset of drought stress, its survival response is immediate and specific. It redirects energy into root extension. The plant elongates its root system more aggressively into the surrounding soil in search of moisture. This is called drought-induced root proliferation, and it is documented across vegetable and fruit crop research going back decades. Here's how you apply it correctly. During the first 1 to 2 weeks after germination, while your seedlings are in small containers with limited soil volume, let the soil dry further than you normally would. Watch the seedlings closely. The moment you see the earliest signs of leaf droop, not collapse, not curling, just the very first loss of turgidity, water normally. Then let it dry out again. Repeat this 2 or 3 times during the root establishment phase. The root architecture that develops through those 2 or 3 mild stress cycles is measurably deeper and more laterally extensive than seedlings watered on a fixed schedule throughout. And a deeper root system before the plant ever goes in the ground means greater drought tolerance, greater nutrient access, and greater yield potential at harvest. I know it feels wrong. I remember the first time I let seedlings wilt on purpose. I stood there second-guessing myself the entire time, but the plants recovered within an hour of watering, and they transplanted with root systems that were noticeably more developed. Trust the biology. Secret 6. Mycorrhizal inoculation. Timing is everything. Mycorrhizal fungi have been in home gardening for years now. Most gardeners who know about them apply them at planting time, dusting the bottom of the planting hole, or mixing them into garden soil. That timing is significantly less effective than what I'm going to describe. And here's the plant biology that explains why. The symbiotic relationship between plant roots and mycorrhizal networks forms most readily when the fungi make direct contact with active, undamaged root tips. At the moment the root system is in a state of active growth and maximum hormonal receptivity. That window is first transplant. When you move the seedling from its small pot to its next container or into the ground. At that exact moment, the root tips are exposed, undamaged, and sending out the chemical signals that invite fungal colonization. This is when you apply the inoculant directly onto the exposed root plug, dusted dry or dipped into a dilute solution. Then soil goes around it in direct contact with the inoculant. Do not rinse, do not delay. Applying mycorrhizal products to established plants in soil, top dressing, mixing into compost, is better than nothing, but the active root tips are deep and no longer in the acute colonization window. The product sitting near the base of a plant that has been in the ground for 2 weeks is largely wasted. The timing is the technique. Get it right once and you don't have to overthink it again. Secret 7. It's not about more light. It's about the right light. This one genuinely surprised me when I first understood the photobiology behind it, because it explained something I'd observed for years without being able to explain. Seedlings respond not just to light intensity, but to light spectrum, specifically the ratio of blue wavelength light to far red wavelength light hitting the leaf surface. High blue light ratios signal to the seedling that it is in an open, unshaded environment. In response, the plant grows compact and stocky, shorter internodes, thicker stems, darker leaf tissue. Exactly what you want. When the ratio shifts toward red and far red wavelengths, the seedling interprets this as shade competition, as if a taller plant is blocking the light above it. The plant's response is automatic and fast. It elongates upward, reaching for the light it believes is being blocked. This shade avoidance response is the biological cause of leggy seedlings. It has nothing to do with how many hours of light the seedling receives. A seedling can sit in a south-facing window for 12 hours a day and still go leggy if the spectrum skews red. Here's the fix. Supplement your seedlings at emergence with a blue spectrum LED grow light. Look for the 400 to 500 nanometer range. Even an inexpensive small clip-on grow light running blue dominant spectrum for 12 hours will produce more compact, structurally sound seedlings than a full day on the brightest windowsill in your house. The investment is small. The structural difference is visible within a week. Secret 8, cut, never pull. You already know you're supposed to thin seedlings. Here are the 2 things almost everyone does wrong. First, they wait too long. By the time seedlings look crowded enough to thin, their root systems are already intertwined. Second, they pull, and pulling one seedling out of a cell disrupts, tears, and sometimes exposes the roots of every neighboring seedling it shared space with. Thinning should happen at the cotyledon stage, or earlier than feels comfortable, before the first true leaf unseeps, and it should always be done with clean scissors or fine snips at the soil line. Cut the unwanted seedling. Leave the root in the soil. It breaks down harmlessly, contributes minor organic matter, and causes zero disturbance to the plant you chose to keep. Every time you pull a seedling, instead of cutting it, you set back the ones you kept by days. At a stage where every single day of healthy root development matters, that's not a small cost. Secret 9, humidity, not temperature, is the real hardening off problem everyone knows about hardening off, is gradual exposure to outdoor conditions before transplant, and almost everyone frames it as a temperature adjustment. Get the seedling used to cooler air. That's the whole story. Here's what that story leaves out. Indoor growing environments typically run at 50 to 70% relative humidity. Outdoor environments on a warm day with even mild airflow can drop to 30% or below. When a seedling that has spent its entire life in high humidity encounters the drop suddenly, its leaf surface loses moisture faster than the root system can replace it. This is called vapor pressure deficit shock. It's the real cause of the wilting, leaf curl, and transplant stress that most gardeners blame on temperature or wind. The correct hardening off protocol addresses humidity first. In the final week before transplant, the open windows near your seedlings, increase airflow with a fan, reduce misting frequency. You are conditioning the stomata, the tiny pores on the leaf surface, and the leaf cuticle to function in lower humidity conditions before the plant ever goes outside. Then introduce the outdoor exposure alongside that indoor humidity reduction. Temperature adjustment matters, but it's the secondary variable. Humidity is primary. And once you understand that, the whole hardening off process makes considerably more sense. Here's the thing about the standard advice: watch them, water them, give them light, don't disturb them. It isn't wrong. It just describes the floor, not the ceiling. It keeps seedlings alive. It does nothing to build the structural foundation that determines how much those seedlings can produce. The sprouting stage is not a passive holding pattern between germination and transplant. It is the window where root architecture, stem structure, stress resilience, and light response are all being hard-coded into the plant. What you do or don't do in these first 2 weeks follows that plant all the way to harvest. If you try one of these techniques and it doesn't go perfectly, breathe. None of them are catastrophic if you get them slightly wrong. If the controlled wilt goes a touch too far, water immediately and the seedling will recover. If you apply silica at a slightly higher concentration than ideal, flush with plain water and dial it back. Seedlings are more resilient than they look. These techniques are built on biological responses the plant already knows how to make. You're working with the plant's instincts, not against them. The goal is to add 1 or 2 of these to your next sprouting cycle and see what changes. You don't have to do all 9 at once. Save this video. Genuinely come back to it at the start of every growing season, because each of these techniques is most powerful when it's applied at exactly the right stage, and that timing is easy to forget. And leave a comment telling me which of these 9 secrets you had never heard before today. That one piece of information matters to me because it tells me where the gaps in gardening content are. The next problem most gardeners hit after the sprouting stage is transplant shock. That brutal 2-week period when a seedling that looked perfect in the tray suddenly struggles in the ground. There's a companion video to this one that walks through exactly what's happening physiologically during transplant shock and how to move seedlings with almost zero stress. I'll link it right here. You're a gardener who pays attention. That already puts you ahead. Now you have the tools to show for it.